So this is our first home buyer webinar that we're doing. So thanks for coming. And so let me just introduce us. Let me start with introducing your team that's here tonight. So you will need 3 professionals when you're buying your first home or your 18th home. You will need a mortgage professional, you will need a real estate lawyer, and you will need a licensed real estate agent. Let's start with the licensed real estate agent, since that's me. My name is Maria. I'm a real estate broker with Douglas Elliman, and I am a Bronx native and current resident. I run a team called the Capitorter team of licensed real estate salespeople. There's 4 of us, and we are here for you every step of the way. Whatever questions you have, whatever snags come up from start to finish, we're here for you. So we're here to talk you through it and help you through the process. And we specialize in the Bronx, Upper Manhattan, and Westchester. So, and just for you to know, there's 2 types of real estate agents. There is a listing agent that represents the seller, and their fiduciary duty is to the seller. So they're looking out for the best price, the best deal, everything for the seller. And then there's a buyer's agent, such as myself, that would be working for you. So we're looking out for you, whatever you need, and doesn't cost you anything. So the seller pays that real estate commission. So it behooves you, for you to have somebody working for you to show you all different properties and to be representing you and for what you need. So, and then also it's a good idea to work with local people that know the area, know the inventory, know pricing, all of that good stuff. And, for example, if you have an uncle in, Texas who's a litigation attorney, not a great idea. It's not a great match. You really want somebody who's local to that. And with that, I would like to introduce Lisa from Cross Country Mortgage.
Hey, my name is Lisa. I'm a loan officer at Cross Country Mortgage. Cross Country Mortgage is a private mortgage lending bank. So that means we work just like the big banks, but all we do is mortgages. I specialize with first-time home buyers. They're about 90% of my business. I really like helping someone buy their first home. You're going to have tons of questions. You should. It's a big deal, and I'm sort of here to walk you through it. I specialize in New York City, all boroughs, including the Bronx. And we do all types of mortgages for residential. So single family, 2 family, 3 family, condos, co-ops, you sort of name it, we can do it. And I'm really excited to sort of talk you through the process and answer any questions you might have.
And that comes to our real estate attorney, our professional lawyer, and that's you, Tamara.
Hi, how are you? So my name is Tamara Barraquette. I am a real estate attorney. I've had my practice for about 22 years. I know I don't look it, but life is good to me. We absolutely specialize in first-time home buyers. We know how precarious it can be, how emotional it can be, how scary it can be, and exciting. What my office does is, and by the way, we are a bilingual office, we will work the contract with you. We'll explain it to you so you understand it, that you feel comfortable. That if you have questions, you won't feel uncomfortable asking them. We are there for you during the day. My clients have my cell phone. This is something that we've been doing for a long time. We work in conjunction with your bank. And not only am I just doing the work for you, but I'm also explaining the process. My office is located in Queens. I happen to have another office in East Meadow right now that I've just opened up. But we've been doing closings anywhere from Ithaca all the way to Richmond County. So Nassau, Suffolk, the 5 boroughs. I'm originally from Brooklyn. I don't know if you can hear the accent. But I happen to also do not only real estate purchases and sales, but we specialize in real estate related matters such as landlord-tenant law, leases for commercial, residential properties. And we do handle trust and estates and some real estate matters when you happen to need to get letters testamentary or letters of administration. So we run the gambit of what we do, but only as it relates to real estate matters. And that's it.
Thank you. That's I actually learned something from that. That was good. So let's talk about getting you approved. So first, one of the first steps is to get a bank pre-approval. And there are there's a few different types of loans, and Lisa's here to explain the different types.
Sure. So when you think you want to buy a property, the first thing you need to do is talk to a bank professional. And this is because you want to know what your budget is. You don't want to look at properties that are over what you can get a loan for, because that's not really fun. And you also don't want to sort of undercut yourself by thinking your budget is X when maybe it would be more. Also, since COVID, a lot of times most agents are actually requiring a pre-approval to even go see the property, simply because they want to know that the potential buyers that are looking at the property are serious, that they are actually, qualified to potentially buy the property. So the first thing you do is you talk to me or another bank professional, and I'm going to ask you a lot of questions. I'm going to ask you what you think you might want. What's your plan? Are you going to be in the property for like 3 or 4 years, or do you think this is something you might be in for a potentially long time? I'm going to talk to you about your employment. Are you W-2? Are you self-employed? If you're self-employed, 100% you could still get a loan. But I definitely need to see your tax returns. So that's something that we'll talk about. And then also, how much are you going to put down as a down payment? The traditional is 20%, but that by no means is the only option. You can do something like FHA where you do 3.5%. You can do a Sony May First Time Home Buyers Program, which is really awesome. It allows you to actually get down payment assistance of up to 3%. So that's basically free money. It's a specific New York State loan that we're one of the preferred lenders on to help you with the down payment. There are income and purchase price restrictions. So that's something we'll talk about if you meet that criteria. There's also 203K loans, which is a 203K loan is, let's say you buy, you're thinking of buying something that is going to be a gut rehab project, right? That needs a lot of work. A 203K loan can basically finance that gut rehab project. It's a little bit of a trickier loan because you're not just buying the property, but you're financing the renovation project. But it is something that we can talk about. I will need to run your credit because that's the way I sort of see the financial picture of what I can get you qualified for. And then I get you a pre-approval. The pre-approval is typically good for about 4 months. If it expires, I can reissue it without rerunning your credit as long as your credit profile hasn't changed. And it's really a working draft. So as you start to look at things with Maria, we can fine tune that pre-approval based on what you really, find. So maybe you start off thinking you're going to buy a single family. And as you start to see things, you're like, you know what? There's a lot of co-ops in this area that I actually think are what I want to do. We can fine tune that pre-approval to meet the needs of a co-op. So, few things you need to keep in mind after you get that pre-approval. It is based on the financial snapshot that you've given me. So don't change your employment without talking to me. If you're self-employed, do not file your next year's tax returns without talking to me. Don't make any big purchases. Like I had a client who bought a boat. That was a problem. Don't buy a boat. Don't buy try not to open up new credit cards. Again, that doesn't mean you can't do those things. That means that you should talk to me before you do that because it could affect your pre-approval. And then besides that, you go out and start house hunting until you find the right place.
Yep. Sounds good.
Yep.
So finding the perfect place. There you go. Look at that segue. So there are 4. So what's the right type of property for you, right? So there's 4 different types of properties that you as a first-time home buyer can purchase. So let's start with co-ops because we have the most co-ops in all of New York and the most affordable. So you have a lot of choice and you also have affordability. Co-op stand for cooperative. So you own the shares. You don't own the unit, you own shares in the cooperative. There are some misconceptions about co-ops. I think sometimes they get a bad rap by first-time home buyers, to be quite honest, that there's a lot of rules and regulations. And like everything, there's a lot of choices. So each co-op is different. You know, some co-ops have a subletting policy that's immediately after owning it. Some have, you know, pet policies, all of that. So each one is different, but co-ops are, you know, we have a lot of them and they're affordable. So there's that. What else did I want to say? The down payment for a co-op. So that is set by the bylaws of the co-op. A lot of people think that that's set by the seller. It is not. It's set by the bylaws. So the most common down payments are 10 and 20% for the co-ops. And some are 25, but for the most part, 10 and 20. There are certain requirements for a co-op, and that's what Lisa was talking about a little bit. There's a DTI, which stands for debt to income ratio. Some co-ops ask you for a 35 DTI or a 30 DTI. What does that mean to you? That's your debt to income. So it's your debt. So what are your liabilities, whether that be your, you know, car loan, school loan, credit cards, that's your liability, and your assets are your income. So whatever's coming into the home, whatever's, you know, your yearly income for the year. So the easy math on that is a building has a 35 DTI, a debt to income ratio requirement. You can't have a higher than 35%. You would make $100,000 a year and you would owe 35. That's your easy math of a 35 DTI. I can help you with that. I have a really nice app that I use that you can plug in and figure all that out. And we can kind of narrow it down, but that's one of the requirements. And some co-ops in the Bronx especially do not have any requirements for DTIs. There's also sometimes a credit score requirement, not always, but sometimes. And then HOA fees. So that stands for the Homeowners Association fees, or the monthly maintenance. In a co-op, that mostly covers the real estate. That includes the real estate taxes, the heat, the water, and the maintenance of the unit. So you know, snow removal, all of that, garbage, all of that. And you are responsible, the shareholder is responsible for the cooking gas and the electric and cable, of course. So that's the monthly maintenance. I like to look at the HOA in relation to the square footage a lot of times. So if a co-op is 900 square feet and the HOA is, you know, $898 a month, that's about $1 a square foot. So we can kind of look at it and start to see, you know, how high is the HOA? Is it a reasonable HOA? And then there's the board application. So most co-ops have a board approval. So it's a board application or a board package. I help you with that from start to finish. I really, I've gotten into it. I used to fight it a little bit, but now I've given into it and I really kind of like it. And so I've created a template where it has a table of contents, and we can really, it's a living document. So we're going to work on it together as things come in. We'll put them in there. And if you need copies, I have a big office and I make the copies in my office. And it's sort of, we make it so that it's a really beautiful package that we can hand off and feel good about, that we gave the best representation of who you are, so we can get the best results. So that's.
I can interject for 1 second. I just want to say, Maria,
yeah,
not every realtor, not every team does that. I know plenty of realtors that will give their buyers applications and they're kind of like on their own. They're left to their own, you know, devices. So
yes,
that is a big
you.
thing for your team. I love that you guys do that.
Absolutely, because yeah, because also we're spending so much time. Like, it would take you 3 months. Why wouldn't I want to see what they're, you know what I mean? I thank you, but yeah, it would just be a waste of everybody's time and effort to just say, okay, good luck. You know, it just doesn't make a lot of sense for me. And yeah, so, and I've learned the hard way of, like, you know, getting that package together. So, and then the next type of property is a condo. So One of the biggest differences between a condo and a co-op is that you can put a lower percentage down. Some condos you can put as low as 3.5%, 5% down. And with a condo, you own the apartment or the townhouse. We don't have that many condos in New York. We have more in Westchester, but we don't have that many condos in all of New York. And they're a bit more expensive. There is also an HOA. So a monthly maintenance, they're usually lower than a co-op, but it includes your water, and your maintenance, and I think that's it, in your sewage. And then you're responsible for the real estate taxes for the share of your size. So they're structured differently, and a lot of people, this is a good option for people because it's a lower entry point. Even though they're higher cost, they're at lower entry point, so you can do your 5% down for most of it. And the other advantage is that condos, for the most part, can be rented, so they could be seen as some people use them as an investment property, or they say, you know, I want to, in 5 years, I want to start traveling, and so it's a good option for them. So that's condos. And sometimes there's a board application for that as well, with approval, some of them in the Bronx that I can help you through.
Well, and if I could just interject for
Yeah,
one moment,
course.
another important difference between co-op and condos is closing costs. So for a condo, you're gonna have the mortgage tax, which is gonna be a significant increase in closing costs than a co-op. So, you know, when we would have a conversation, one of the things we talk about in terms of your funds, not only included the down payment, but also the closing costs. Because a co-op, you know, is, if it's under $1 million, is going to be the closing costs are going to be very reasonable, versus if you have a condo, you have the mortgage tax, it might be an extra $5,000 or $6,000 because of the closing costs pertaining to a condo versus a co-op.
That's really good. Thank you. That's really helpful. And then that goes to the third category, and that's single family homes, right? So that's pretty straightforward. It's what it sounds like. It's one family that would live there. So it's one dwelling, and you're responsible for, you know, you get responsible for everything. The real estate taxes, the snow removal, everything, but it's your domain and it's yours, but you are responsible for everything. And so that's single family. And then the fourth and last category is multifamily. And for first-time home buyers, it's a 2 to 4 family that you're eligible for. And that is just the way it sounds. So if it's a 2-family, there's 2 apartments. It could be 2 duplexes, but it's 2 apartments. And then 3 and 4. Do you have anything else am I forgetting anything?
No, I think that's a cursory kind of explanation.
Yeah,
I think
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Okay. And your real estate, I said the real estate taxes. Yeah. So that is that. So, okay. So we went out, you got pre-approved, and it's great. You found this beautiful, place that you want, and you're like, this is great. I love it. I want to make an offer. So what is entailed on making the offer, right? So there's certain terms that we're going to determine, and we're going to present. We're going to make an offer to the seller, to the listing agent, to present to the seller. So those terms are pricing, right? So you want to make sure you're going to be offering a right price. And so the way we do that is we look at the comps, also known as the comparables. And so we try to get as like as possible. If it's a single family house and it's a brick house that's 2,200 square feet, we try to find that, you know, in the same zip code, in the same area, in the same condition, try to get as like as possible, and try to, you know, compare that and see what has sold in, you know, the most recent, the better, right? So we'll know whether or not your pricing is right. The same for co-ops and condos and multifamilies. So that's the pricing, and I help you with that, looking at the MLS and sort of knowing inventory and kind of knowing, you know, we talk about strategy of that, right? And then the other term is inspections. So for condos, multifamily, and single family, yes, inspections, absolutely. We want to take a look, and we want to look at everything. The inspection is for you. So this is pretty much, you know, you're hiring the inspector, and let's say you're going to buy this. This is going to be like one of the most expensive things you buy. So you want to make sure you are also looking with the inspector and maybe asking questions. What kind of system? How often do I, you know, the boiler, how often do I service this? All of the nitty gritties about the house that's going to be yours. And also you might find something that we didn't see on the first viewing after inspecting it. We find that, they use these cool tools, the inspectors, and they have these like, moisture detectors, and, oh, was there a leak in the ceiling? And we just kind of, we really, and at that point, if we do find something, we go back and we, maybe we negotiate the price and we talk about maybe fixing it or getting a credit. Co-ops, I don't recommend to do any inspections, because you own the shares and because you're responsible for everything inside the walls. Most things we can check. We run all the faucets, we run them for 5 minutes and make sure they don't leak. You are checking all the outlets, and I have this little tool that I walk around and we check all the outlets and we check the shower and all of that. An example I use is if your kitchen sink breaks, and you're like, oh, what do I do? If it's the faucet, you replace it. If it's the pipe in the wall, the co-op is responsible for that. So an inspection, it's hard to, it's hard to check the things that the building are responsible for. So I don't recommend inspections for co-ops. So that's inspections. And then what are the co-op board, we always look for a board approval in a co-op. So we put together that beautiful package and we present it, and if, God forbid, you do not get approved, we protect your down payment. So we put a board approval so that we're protecting that down payment. And I'm actually going to ask Lisa to talk about the mortgage contingency contingency in the offer. So we always want to put a mortgage contingency, and that's, to protect your down payment, but maybe Lisa can talk about that.
Sure. So typically, a mortgage contingency is language in your contract to make sure that if, God forbid, you don't get approved for a mortgage, though we have done a lot of research up front to make sure you will, you get your down payment back. So it is something that is very important to have in your contract because it allows for that protection. If something happens and you're not able to get a mortgage. Typically, the mortgage contingency is 30 to 45 days, which means from the moment that it is a fully executed contract, which means signed by both buyer and seller, you have 30 to 45 days to get through underwriting and get what's called a mortgage approval, which we'll talk about in a minute, to make sure that you have secured your down payment so that if you don't meet that mortgage contingency, you're able to get it back. That said, it's very, very important to make sure that your application looks great, that you are approved for the mortgage that you're looking for, which is one of the reasons we've gone through the pre-approval process. So, because while that mortgage contingency is important to have a security for you, you want to make sure that, you don't have any problems so that you don't have to get what's called a denial letter, which basically ensures that, you walk away from the agreement. But that's, in an ideal situation, that's not what you want. So, but that's the mortgage contingency, and it's very important to have.
And then there's the deposit. So again, it depends on the type of property you're buying. So if it's a co-op and it has a 10% requirement and you want to put more, of course, that's, totally allowed. But also on a home, are you putting 3.5% or 5% down? And then actually with Tamara, that we talk about at contract signing, I always wonder about that. Like, how do you, what do you recommend a buyer to put at contract signing, right? Because I always try to get the least exposure for them as possible.
I would have to say you're correct about that, because remember, the purpose of the deposit is ideally liquidated damages for the seller. So the deposit is there to show good faith, right? It is the numbers that the bank is going to work with. But the initial down payment, the initial deposit made on contract, not total times, okay? So for example, let's say you're doing an 80% loan to finance and you say, I want to put 20% down of my own money. That's great. But we don't have to put that down when we sign the contract. When we sign the contract, we want to put exactly what Maria said, the least amount down. It does have to be acceptable to the seller's side. You are making the offer, and sometimes the seller's attorney will simply say, you don't have enough skin in the game. I want to ensure that there's a substantial enough of deposit to keep everybody honest. Okay. What does that mean? That just means that you're doing your part. You are completing your application with the co-op board. You're working in conjunction with your mortgage company, that you're taking this deal seriously. Okay. Because if you don't, when you default, and we're going to talk about that a little bit in a few minutes, when a buyer defaults on a contract, those monies that are retained in that escrow account, when you've made that initial down payment, are considered liquidated damages for the seller. So for example, let's say that the reason why you were denied for a loan was because let's say you failed to give information to the bank, or you lied to the bank, and that was the reason for a denial, not because of a financial loan, debt to income ratio situation. If you acted in bad faith and it is shown and established, then the seller can say you breached the contract, and now your down payment, because every real estate piece, art parcel is a unique parcel. So the down payment is considered damages in this particular situation. You will be forfeiting your down payment to the seller. So that's why we opt not to put as much money down upon initial contract signing.
Thank you. That actually helps me.
Down and just the last one. Yeah, good.
Yeah. And then the last term that we put on the offer is the closing date. So that is up to the situation. That's sort of a, is it a closing ASAP, meaning, as soon as we can, as soon as possible, or is it there's a tenant in one of the units of the two family that we have to give another 3 months to. So we determine that depending on the situation, and then we present all of these terms, and we present it to the listing agent, and he presents it to the seller, and we negotiate. I'm sure they'll come back with us as a counter offer, and then we hopefully we get an accepted offer. Yay! And so then I create what's called a memo of sale or a deal sheet, and that is a blueprint of the contract. So I try to get as much information as possible for the lawyer to work on the contract. So that is everything that we just talked about: the pricing, the terms, if anything came up in inspection, anything that was negotiated. There could be really specific things like, they're going to take the dining room, they're going to replace the dining room fixture or something like that. So we create as much information as possible in that deal sheet, and I send that off to the lawyers. And what else am I saying? And then I guess we're talking about going into contract. What is it? Oh, and then inspections if we have it, and then going into contract.
Right. So yeah. So yay, accepted offer, and then going into contract, and they kind of meld perfectly into each other. Inspections are kind of most people. Well, you know what? I shouldn't say that. I encourage all my clients to get inspections. Some people opt not to, whether maybe it's a newer building. And people feel, oh, well, I have a bit of a construction background, I don't need to do it necessarily. I encourage my clients to do it. I know Maria does as well, because she's right. In the deal sheet, if there are things that need to be addressed, we can put them into contract. And when we actually get the contract, and it is the seller's attorney that prepares the initial terms and sends them to the buyer's attorney to review. So me or whomever ultimately gets to represent you is the attorney who's going to be reviewing all of these terms and making sure that what was stated in that deal sheet that Maria created is actually now living in this contract. Which I think could segue into contract, Maria. I don't know. I'm going to go into the next.
Voila.
Voila. So the due diligence really is, for me as counsel, the initial due diligence before we get into contract is that inspection report. Every contract will make a representation that the seller will absolutely represent that when you close as a buyer, and you will be doing a walkthrough, we'll talk about that, but when you actually close, that the electricity will work, the plumbing, the heat, the appliances, and the roof will be free of leaks. These are the standard New York clauses. Unfortunately, people don't think about the other aspects of the physicality of the house. So what's the foundation like? Okay. How old is this boiler? Okay, sure, the heat's on, but am I going to have to put in a new heating system in another 6 months? All right, the roof isn't leaking, but is it on its 5th layer of shingle? So these are things that are important. And again, this is something that an inspection report will tell you. It sounds as if it's going out of its way to look for all the negativity. It's not. It's really educating you on what you should know as a homeowner for this house that you're hopefully going to live in for many, many years to come. So you need to know not only the financial investment you're making when you buy the house, but perspective in terms of upkeep. So that's due diligence. Other terms of the contract really are, it identifies the parties, it's telling us what appliances are involved, again, the price, the down payment. As Lisa said, it talks about a mortgage contingency because the deal is contingent upon you getting approved for a certain stated amount. Okay, we can't say that we're going to borrow $500,000 in the contract and then something goes awry and we get a denial letter saying, oh, well, we applied for this $600,000 loan and we weren't approved for it. So these are very important terms that we have to make sure are straightforward and agreed upon by all the parties. Also, the time frame. Lisa said that it's usually 45 days from the time we get into contract, for 45 days for the bank to let us know if you have now been approved for this loan. Sometimes it will take longer than 45 days. Most of the time it will take less. So we need to know what those dates are so that we can ask for the necessary extensions, if at all. Now, some other things that we'll talk about, it'll talk about title. It'll talk about the type of property that you're buying. Are you buying a 1-family house? Are you buying a 2-family house? We have to make sure that's stated in the contract, right? You're not going to pay $500,000 for a 2-family house only to find out later that it's still legally a 1. So again, these are very important terms that we have to figure out and make sure that they are stated correctly in the contract. The physical aspect of the house. Okay, great. They're standard electric, plumbing, heating, appliances, and roof. But what about this inspection report, our due diligence? We requested that certain additional repairs be made. And if the seller agrees, they have to be set forth in this contract. And they have to be set forth when we sign the contract. We can't decide, okay, you know what, I signed the contract, now I'm thinking I should do this inspection report. By all means, you can, but the problem is if you find something out now, post-execution, that maybe the window locks are all broken or something's wrong with the water heater, I can't then turn around and compel the seller to fix it if it's technically working on the day of closing. Everything else is as is. That's another important term regarding the physicality of a house or a condo or even a co-op for that matter. Okay, buyers are buying this house as is, this co-op as is, meaning if there's a broken window now, then we're agreeing to take it with this broken window unless we've negotiated terms otherwise stated. We will do a walkthrough and we will make sure that the seller has maintained the status quo. So then if during the walkthrough, the seller has maybe damaged something in the midst of the move and we see that something is altered or different, then and only then would the seller be required to repair or replace or give you a credit. And then of course, the closing date. The closing date is, as Maria kind of alluded to, very, very important. Both parties are required to get themselves ready to close by that specific closing date. It's important for so many reasons. It's important because Lisa is locking in your rate and your rates are live for a certain period of time before you have to extend them. So we need the seller to do what they need to do in order to clear title and be ready to close by that contract date. And just as you have to make sure that you are ready to close by that date, the seller cannot be holding over. You know, sellers have to move too. Unfortunately, sometimes you find yourself in a situation where a seller is selling to buy. And it's kind of like now you're just a peg, you're waiting for them to make a move. So that's why these terms are there. That's why it's so important. Another example is, Maria, again, you touched on it. When you have a tenant, maybe you're selling a one-family house or two-family house, it says it's in broom clean, but now you have a tenant that hasn't left. So again, everybody is aware from the onset their rights and responsibilities to be treated in the contract.
Thank you.
Then we'll get ready to close. You're welcome.
That's very helpful. Also for me to hear all of this, I have to say.
Oh, thank
We don't
you.
normally do this. We just work on work with
Yes.
clients. So this brings us to the contract part of the bank, and that's where Lisa comes in.
Yeah, so, okay, so you've gotten pre-approved. You've given me all your documents up front, so we know that this is gonna work and it's gonna be great. And then you tell me, you send me an email, you give me a phone call, and you say, oh my gosh, we have an accepted offer. I say, fantastic. I'm gonna get everything ready to go. As soon as you have fully executed contracts, send them to me. So as Tamara pointed out, the dates are very important here. So once you have a fully executed contract, which means it's signed by both buyer and seller, on the bank's end, it becomes what's called a live deal, which means we get you some initial disclosures to e-sign. We order the appraisal, and we basically get you ready to get you into underwriting as soon as possible. This is when I think me and my team really shine, because we are very, very fast. And getting through underwriting as quickly as possible is really, really important. If you're buying a co-op, you're not going to be able to have a board interview until you get through underwriting and get what's called a mortgage commitment or a loan approval letter. So the faster you get that mortgage approval, the faster you get to your board interview, which means the faster you can get ready to close. Even if you don't buy a co-op, it's really important to get through underwriting and to know that you're good to go. This deal is great. And that, on your end, everything is ready to get ready for closing. So my processor, Danielle, will review your file and ask you for any updated documents that you didn't give to me. And then we will get you to the underwriter. The underwriting approval for you is basically what the underwriter does is look at the loan and make sure that it meets all the criteria of the guidelines for that specific program. And then she gives you the mortgage approval, which is basically a stamp from the bank that says, yep, this loan looks great. We are ready to take it and to close it. And there'll be some conditions, maybe there'll be homeowners insurance. When you buy a property, you have to pay your year of homeowners insurance up front prior to closing or at closing, unless it's a co-op. And then like a few other things, like maybe a verification of employment, or maybe the underwriter has a question on your income and wants some clarification on that. But usually they're very easy conditions that you sort of work on after you get the underwriting approval until you get closed. Simultaneously, if you're buying a condo or co-op, the bank is actually doing two approvals. They're approving you, the individual, and they are approving the building. Okay, so we are going to do a lot of research up front. Once you tell me the address of the building that you're buying, to make sure that we get the documentation that we need to approve the building. This is when it's actually really important to work with a team, because when Tamara does her due diligence, she's going to be able to see the documents of the co-op and condo.
Yes.
And because we work together a lot, she'll call me if there's an issue and say, hey, Lisa, this is what I see on the sponsors. Is this going to be an issue for financing? And a lot of times if there's an issue with the building, we can figure out a way around it 9 times out of 10 if we find out about it early enough. So that's why it's really important to not only work with, you know, a great mortgage person, a great real estate person, a great lawyer, but that's why it's really great to work with a team that works together a lot, because we will be in contact with each other and in dialogue with each other. And that at the end of the day just helps you to make sure that there are no issues with approving your loan. Locking. Let's talk about locking for a minute. So rates are up. We are in an increased rate environment. We're in an inflation situation. This is what's going on. In terms of locking your rate, it's really important to understand the parameters of what you're doing. Once you lock a rate, you are on a time clock. If you don't close before that lock expires, you have to pay an extension fee. The seller will never pay it. It's on you. So you will have to pay the extension fee, and those can get really expensive really fast. So that's why it's really important. You know, for example, if you're buying a co-op, co-ops take a while. You have to go through board approval, you have a co-op attorney. So we'll have a discussion both at accepted offer and at fully executed contract, and then again at mortgage contingency about where we are in the process and when is the best time to lock. I will always lock my clients whenever they want, but I just want them to really understand you know, if we lock you for 60 days and it's not going to close in 60 days, this is the risk you're taking in terms of extension fees. So yeah, so once we have the mortgage commitment, I let you know, I let Maria and Tamara know, and then you start working on the co-op board application. You've done everything with Maria before, so you just pop that mortgage commitment in there and get the interview. And if you don't, if it's not a co-op, then you just start working on the conditions so we can get you clear to close.
Great. I went a little ahead, so I'm just getting ready to close. There you go. Thank you. Let's see. Okay, so you're in contract, and what's happening on my end for the real estate. My job at this point is to make sure, my biggest job is a liaison, making sure that the process is going smoothly. Like we're all saying, we communicate with each other, so making sure everybody's communicating, we have all the same information, we're sharing information, everything is moving along in the time frame that we need it to move along. That's like the most important thing. I always compare it to, like, who has the ball, who's holding the ball, are they holding the ball too long, like, where is it, does anybody know where the ball is, you know? So that's really what I'm doing behind the scenes. I'm also helping you, if it's a co-op, I'm helping you with the package, as we discussed, and you know, printing it and delivering it and making sure it gets to the right person, and that there's somebody that I've given it to, that I'm tracking it and I'm checking it, and you know, maybe if we give it to the management company and we make sure, you know, what's the status, checking in on it, making sure everybody's on the same page. And that's really it. That's it for contract. Am I forgetting anything? I think that's it. And then closing. I cannot believe we got here, but we've done all of this, and now we are ready to close. So what are the final steps? Lisa, can you explain what the bank has to, when we get those beautiful words of clear to close?
So we get the clear to close, and I send out an email to everybody, and I say, woohoo! We have the clear to close, which basically means the bank is ready to close whenever the closing is scheduled, you know, as long as it's before the lock expires. One thing I want to say before Tamara takes over, because this is really important, this happens to my clients all the time. You do not want to schedule movers or want to break a lease until you get the clear to close.
Exactly.
Closing scheduled earliest.
That is an excellent piece of advice.
Absolutely. And don't tell your landlord until you get,
like,
yes, I agree. And to never tell your landlord you're moving until you get the board.
Exactly. It's really, really
Yeah.
important. Because, you know, until you get the clear to close and you have the date scheduled, you know, everything's loosey-goosey. So it's really important to sort of wait for those words from the bank and to wait for your attorney to schedule the closing. And Tamara, I'll let you take it from here.
Right. So, I'm going to harken back to what we talked about with that contract date because, with Lisa, listen, she's fast. So the thing is, sometimes we will get a clear to close before maybe even the seller is ready to, and at least I'm on that contract. So Maria's role is even more vital than she explains because unfortunately for the attorneys, I can't speak to the seller directly, nor can he ever speak to the buyer's attorney. It's really Maria that's going to be able to go behind the scenes. As a realtor, they can speak directly to the parties. And this way we have a better idea and understanding as to when we can schedule a closing. Once Lisa's bank attorney tells me, okay, Tammy, let's schedule, I always reach out to the bank attorney and we speak to our respective clients. But again, the attorneys are probably, even though we've got the most liability sometimes, we're kind of in the dark. So I'm really grateful when you have a realtor that's there and can get the information behind scenes. So once we actually do get a date, and I will call the client, the seller will call their client, I will be speaking with the bank attorney, we will be advising the title company who is there to ensure you that everything is legal, to all appear on a certain date at a certain time in a designated place. And it's really then that I'm going to get the numbers from Lisa. I'm going to be able to get adjustments. We're going to go over what your numbers will be so that you can walk in feeling confident. You're not going to be surprised. Okay. When you do a closing, the buyer is only responsible for the fees the day of closing going forward in time, and the seller is responsible for the house fees the night before going back. So what do those really consist of? Adjustments for water, adjustments for taxes, maybe adjustments for homeowners association fees. When you're dealing with a co-op, we're prorating maintenance. So these are all very important things that are going to show up and that we'll be adjusting for. Then, of course, your costs are going to be added, any legal fees, any title fees, and we will get all of our bank fees. So once as a group we get that together, we'll be reviewing the numbers with you. We've had a closing scheduled. Now you feel confident what you have to bring to the table. And it's at that point that we will say, Maria, it's time to do that walkthrough because you do get another bite at the apple. You do now have to go back to the property and ensure that those terms that were stated in the contract, that the electric, that the plumbing, that the heating, that the appliances are working, that the roof isn't leaking, that it's vacant and room clean, okay? And that the house is actually in the condition that you saw it the first time in, okay? Those are so vital because once you close and you get the keys and we're taking pictures and, we're snapping it to everybody, that's it. Once you go to the house, you're done. So it's so important that you go with Maria, that you take your time, that you look through the house and make sure that it is the way you recall it.
Absolutely. And we try to do that as close to the closing as possible. So if your closing is at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I always try to do it the morning of or the night before so that we can, because, you just want the least amount of time to spend so if anything would go wrong, right? So we try to do it the closest possible and we test everything and, again, it has to be in the same condition. And if there's any issues that come up, and they do. I take exciting videos and I send them to everybody. It's really fun, like getting, it's a picture of a faucet leaking or whatever it is. And then we deal with it at the closing. But that's another reason why it's good to have these relationships that work together because we can immediately send it. And I know that everybody's going to respond and we can solve the problem right away and whatever it would be. Because we always, whatever problem that would be, if we do find an issue, that is solved at the closing. And that's about it. And then we go to the closing. It's a happy day. And am I forgetting anything else?
It's a happy day, right? I would be there. So I would be explaining all of the bank documents to you so that you understand. And again, we're going to reiterate what your rate is, what your monthly payment is, what the term of your loan is. We're going to be going over all of that. You will be getting copies of everything. Okay. And most importantly, you get your deed or your stock and your proprietary lease. So I will walk you through all of that. Make sure that you understand it. Ensure that we have no questions about anything, not just legal aspects. Sometimes hey, you're handing me keys. What do these open the doors to? I mean, we go
Exactly.
through everything
Exactly.
before how do what's the alarm
Exactly.
code now that I own the house?
Exactly.
I don't know how to get into this place. So we go through all of that before you walk out the door to your new home.
And then it's yours at the closing. That's the very immediate reward. And so I want to thank you for attending, for coming to our first webinar. And we are here for you every step of the way from start to finish. And I'm sure there's a lot of information. So if you have any questions, we are
And
here.
I think Brian has 2 mortgage questions that I'll just
okay.
answer really quick.
Yeah, sure.
From the chat before I got to jump off.
Yeah.
So yeah, Brian. So yes, because you owned a co-op beforehand, you're that you bought it a year ago. Do you live in that property right now? Yep. So then that would not you are not considered a first-time home buyer. That doesn't mean that you can't do other options where you put, like, for example, like 3.5% down if you go FHA or something like that. We would probably have a conversation. It depends on if you're planning on keeping the co-op, if you buy the new place or selling it. FHA has some rules about the properties being so close to each other in terms of using the income from the place you're leaving. But that's a conversation we can have. You can use my Calendly to make an appointment. In terms of your second question about if you buy a multifamily, yes, you can use the income from the units you're not going to be living in. I imagine you're going to be living in one and maybe renting out the others. You can use that income. We do need a fully executed lease prior to closing, and it cannot be a family member. So that's something that we can have a discussion about in terms of what that would look like. But that I have clients that do that all the time to help qualify for a multifamily, and it's as long as the building. The only issue is that the building has to be legal for the units that you're using the income from. So if it's a legal 3-family, then you can use leases for 2 other units with the idea of you living in one. If it's a legal 2-family, but there's currently 3 units in there, you can only use 2. You can only use 1 unit of income and 1 unit that you live in, because it goes by the DOB, the New York City Department of Buildings certification of what the building is legally licensed for.
Right.
Does that answer your question? Okay, I still can't hear you. I don't know why, but that's okay.
We're lip reading now. Yeah.
But cool. Well, I have to jump off.
Okay. Bye. Thank you, everybody. And there's our information, and that was great. Thank you, guys.
Yeah,
Bye.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye, guys. Bye.